What's clear is that they didn't show the engine power through any of the practice because there's the whole talk of compression ratio, and they've obviously done a really solid job with their engine, which we have as well. But it would be interesting to. I want to understand why it's like 0.2 or more just through power per sector, and so if it is a compression thing, I want to understand why the FIA haven't done anything and what's being done to rectify it. But if it's not and it's just pure pet, then we have to do a better job.
So imagine you're booting up a highly anticipated, intensely competitive multiplayer racing game.
Oh, yeah, the kind you wait years for.
Right, exactly. So you drop into the lobby, the countdown finishes and the lights go out, you slam the accelerator, but as you hit that first corner, you realize something is just terribly wrong.
Like your controller is broken.
Worse, it's like one player has somehow secretly unlocked the ultimate cheat codes. I mean, they are effectively flying a spaceship while you and everyone else in the lobby are struggling just to get your go-karts into second gear.
That is honestly a brutally accurate way to describe it.
Yeah, and that's the exact dynamic sitting in this stack of notes and telemetry reports we are deep diving into today. We're looking at the start of the 2026 Formula One season, and, well, you're going to see exactly why the FIA, the sports governing body, is currently in an absolute panic.
Because it's a profound imbalance. What you just described, it isn't merely a team having a good weekend. It's the kind of disparity that breaks the fundamental illusion of a fair and competitive contest. When you look at the lap time data from the Australian Grand Prix, the landscape of the sport hasn't just shifted. I mean, it has completely fractured.
Yeah, the governing body is basically scrambling to rewrite the rule book in real time, right?
Yeah.
Just to keep the grid in the same time zone, let alone the same race.
Exactly. They are terrified.
I really want to break down exactly how fractured we're talking about here. Because if you look at the raw results from Melbourne, it is just staggering. Mercedes secured a completely uncontested 1-2 finish.
Untouchable.
But the glaring issue isn't even who took the trophy.
Yeah.
It's what happened behind them. I mean, half the grid was locked in this brutal car-destroying fight just to claim 15th place.
Yeah, and the technical analyses you brought in use a really striking comparison for this. They liken the current state of F1 to the 24 Hours of Le Mans.
Which is fascinating. I mean, Le Mans is totally different from F1.
It is, but the comparison is the perfect lens to view the structural problem. If you're familiar with Le Mans, you know it runs a massive field. Often over 60 cars on the track at the exact same time.
Right, but they aren't all in the same race, technically.
Precisely. They are intentionally split into 3 distinct regulated classes. You have the hypercar class, which are the elite, multi-million-dollar aerodynamic prototypes.
The spaceships.
Exactly. Then below them, you have the LMP2 class. Those are mostly privateer teams with slightly less sophisticated machinery. And finally, you have the LMGT3 class, which look much more like the sports cars you might actually see on the highway.
And they all share the same track, right? And navigate around each other.
Yeah, but everyone inherently understands who is competing in which league. It is designed from the ground up to be a multi-class race.
But F1 is inherently built on the promise of being a single-tier motorsport. I mean, you pay a premium as a fan to watch the absolute pinnacle of engineering parity. Or at least, the illusion of it.
Yeah, that's the whole selling point.
Right. Yet, digging into the paddock telemetry here, it seems the 2026 season has accidentally recreated this exact Le Mans class system. And it's done it in a way that is incredibly jarring for the viewer.
It really is.
According to the breakdown, we essentially have 4 entirely different categories of cars trying to pretend they are in the same race.
We do. And at the very top, in that elite tier, you have a class comprised of exactly one team, Mercedes.
Just them.
Just them. They are running their new M17 power unit, and the engineering briefs characterize them as operating in a completely different paradigm. They've built the Formula One equivalent of a Le Mans hypercar, and they are out there racing a ghost ship.
No one can even touch them, which drops us into the second tier, what the data is calling the midfield.
Right.
And this includes the heavy hitters you'd expect to be challenging for wins. Rebel Ford, Ferrari, McLaren. They're essentially the LMP2 cars in this scenario.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. And I found a really intriguing detail in the notes regarding Red Bull. They have openly admitted that they are actually using the exact same power unit philosophy as Mercedes for 2026.
Yeah, they have.
So if they have the same blueprint, why on earth are they stuck in the LMP2 class?
Well, because having the right philosophy doesn't guarantee the physical engineering can handle the stress. I mean, the concept might be identical on a whiteboard, but the reality on the track is dictated by metallurgy and thermal dynamics.
So the materials just fail.
Exactly. While Mercedes is cruising to a comfortable finish, these midfield teams are suffering from catastrophic reliability nightmares. The telemetry shows Red Bull's energy recovery systems are essentially cannibalizing themselves under race conditions.
Oh, wow. So they are pushing a philosophy their physical hardware simply cannot sustain without blowing up.
Yeah, they're tearing themselves apart trying to keep up.
And then you fall down to the third tier. The back markers.
Yeah.
The bottom 6 teams on the grid.
The LMGT3s.
Right, the LMGT3s of F1 right now. They are suffering from such massive power deficits that getting knocked out in Q1 feels like a mathematical certainty every single weekend.
It does. And this extreme structural inequality, it completely warps how we evaluate driver performance.
How so?
Take Max Verstappen's drive in Australia, for example.
Okay.
He started all the way down in P20 due to penalties, right? And he fought his way up to finish P6.
Sounds amazing on paper.
Right. In a healthy competitive season, you'd look at that result and praise the competitive parity of the field. You'd think, wow, a great driver can carve through traffic because the cars are relatively close in pace.
I have to stop you there, though. Because looking at the pace differentials in our notes, viewing that drive as a sign of a healthy sport feels like a massive trap.
It is absolutely a trap. The data explicitly warns against viewing that drive as proof of parity.
Because he's basically driving an LMP2 car through a field of GT3s.
Exactly. It was a hero drive in a fundamentally broken field when half the entire grid doesn't even possess the mechanical capability to sniff Q3. A generational talent dragging a midfield car to P6 is a statistical outlier. It is not the norm.
You read the post-race transcripts, and the drivers are literally calling their own cars painful to drive. I mean, the frustration is just palpable.
It's miserable for them.
And frankly, as a fan, it is agonizing to watch a race where the leader is 50 seconds down the road by lap 20. Which, makes me seriously question the governing body's role here.
It's a fair question.
If Mercedes is in their own elite category, just miles ahead of everyone else,
Right.
Is this just standard Formula One engineering brilliance that we should applaud? Or is the FIA actively destroying the sport's appeal by allowing a single team to essentially race in a completely different category?
No, that is the ultimate tightrope walk of Formula One. At its core, F1 is an engineering arms race. The team that builds the best machine within the regulations deserves to win. And Mercedes absolutely deserves immense credit for mastering the 2026 regulations with that M17 power unit.
They did the homework.
They did. However, from a commercial and survival standpoint, a performance gap this vast is toxic. The issue isn't simply that Mercedes built a fast car.
What is it then?
It's that the power gap is so insurmountable that it destroys the core product. When the outcome of a Grand Prix is a foregone conclusion before the formation lap even begins, well, fans tune out.
Yeah, you cannot sell a multi-class endurance race to an audience paying for a single-tier championship.
Exactly. The FIA looked at the dropping viewership numbers alongside those exploding midfield engines and realized they were self-sabotaging the sport if they let this continue.
Which explains why they just dropped a regulatory bomb on the paddock. I mean, because fans are visibly frustrated by this lack of competitive parity, the FIA initiated an unprecedented mid-season technical crackdown on February 28th.
A massive crackdown.
The details of these new rules are highly specific, and they revolve entirely around the engine. Specifically, the power unit's compression ratio.
Right.
But before we get into the new testing protocols, I need you to explain the baseline here. The rules mandate that the engine compression ratio must remain strictly under 16.1. Physically, what does that actually mean inside the car?
Okay, so for the listener, a 16.1 compression ratio simply describes how tightly the engine squeezes the air and fuel before igniting it.
Okay, simple enough.
Imagine the cylinder inside the engine. The piston moves up, compressing the air-fuel mixture into a space that is exactly 1/16 of its original volume before the spark plug fires.
Got it.
The physics are simple. A tighter squeeze equals a bigger explosion, which translates to more raw power and more straight-line speed. The FIA capped this at 16.1 to limit the overall horsepower and, theoretically, keep the field competitive.
Okay, so every team submits an engine that measures at 16.1 when the FIA inspectors check it in the garage. But the new crackdown is implementing a mandatory hot test at exactly 130 degrees Celsius starting on June 1st.
Yes, that's the big change.
I understand the 16.1 limit, but I'm getting hung up on this temperature mandate. Why 130 degrees? I mean, if the engine block is illegal, shouldn't it be illegal at any temperature sitting in the garage?
Well, that is exactly the loophole the FIA is trying to close. When you measure an engine block, the pistons, the cylinders, at room temperature, what we call the cold test, everything might perfectly adhere to that legal 16.1 limit.
So it passes inspection.
Right, it passes. But you have to remember that Formula One engines operate in an extreme thermal environment. Metals behave very differently when they get hot. They expand.
Okay, so to put this in everyday terms, imagine you are using a glass French press to make coffee.
Okay, I like this.
When the glass carafe is cold, the plunger slides down really easily. There's a little bit of a gap around the edges, and some liquid can escape the seal.
Right.
But imagine if, when you pour the boiling water in, the heat caused the rubber seal on the plunger to expand perfectly. It creates an airtight, high-pressure vacuum.
Which forces everything down perfectly.
Exactly. Suddenly you're extracting way more pressure out of the exact same press just because of the temperature change. Is that essentially what the engineering notes suggest Mercedes might be doing with their engine cylinders?
That is a brilliant analogy. And yes, it captures the mechanical reality perfectly. F1 engineers are working with incredibly complex metallurgy.
Stuff we don't even see in normal cars.
Right. They can design internal components using specific alloys that feature directional thermal expansion. This means the metal doesn't just expand randomly, it warps and tightens in a highly calculated way.
So as the engine gets hot out on the track,
As it reaches operating temperature, the clearances inside the combustion chamber dynamically tighten. So while it measured at a legal 16.1 in the garage, in the heat of the race, that dynamic expansion might push the actual running compression ratio up to 16.5.1 or even 17.1.
which means they are getting a significantly bigger bang and a massive power advantage exactly when they need it. And it's completely invisible to a cold garage inspection.
Precisely. By introducing this mandatory hot test at 130 degrees Celsius, the FIA is stating that they are no longer just measuring the engine when it is turned off. They are simulating the extreme thermal environment of an actual Grand Prix.
So the new directive explicitly states that any part allowing the engine to exceed that 16.1 limit while running hot is strictly banned.
Exactly. The engine geometry cannot morph. And the telemetry notes point out that the FIA is so serious about closing this loophole that by 2027, they will completely scrap the cold test.
Wow.
Yeah, the 130-degree hot test will be the only metric that matters.
That is a massive paradigm shift for the engineering departments.
Yeah.
And while they were rewriting the engine rulebook, the FIA also had to tweak the qualifying format.
Right, because of the grid size.
Exactly. Because we have 22 cars on the grid for the 2026 season, the basic math of a qualifying session was causing chaos. So they extended Q3 to 13 minutes, shortened the break between Q2 and Q3 to 7 minutes.
And the really brutal change.
Yeah, the most brutal change.
Yeah.
6 cars will now be knocked out in both Q1 and Q2 instead of the traditional 5.
That last point is crucial. Knocking out 6 cars instead of 5 creates a brutal traffic jam in Q1. It puts microscopic margins on those backmarker LMGT3 tier teams we discussed.
Because they're already so slow.
Right. If you have a massive power deficit, and now you have to beat out an additional car just to survive the first 15 minutes of the weekend, the pressure on those bottom-tier outfits becomes almost insurmountable. It is a compounding penalty for not nailing the regulations out of the gate.
So on paper, this looks like a sweeping, aggressive crackdown. I mean, the FIA is forcefully trying to cap engine compression and temperature to level the playing field.
On paper, yes.
But here is where the paddock politics get incredibly strange. Looking at the voting records from the recent commission, there's a glaring disconnect between the FIA's intentions and the manufacturer's reaction.
Oh, the voting is fascinating.
The vote to pass these mid-season rule changes was entirely unanimous. Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull, Audi, Honda, every single one of them voted yes.
Yep, every single one.
I don't buy that for a second. In F1, voting no to an anti-cheating directive is basically a confession. But if this rule is explicitly designed to target a specific thermal loophole that Mercedes is exploiting, why would Mercedes happily vote to approve a nerf on their own car?
Well, you have hit on the psychological warfare of Formula One politics. You are absolutely right that optics play a massive role here. Mercedes voting yes is a masterclass in PR.
Because it makes them look innocent?
Exactly. By supporting the directive, they essentially tell the FIA and the media, we have nothing to hide, regulate all you want.
Wow.
But the deeper, more terrifying reality for the rest of the grid is that Mercedes might simply be calling the FIA's bluff. They might be entirely confident that they can engineer their way around a 130-degree test by the time June rolls around.
Or maybe they just have so much pace in hand it doesn't matter.
Right. Their baseline advantage might be so vast that losing a fraction of a compression ratio won't actually dethrone them.
Which lines up perfectly with the quotes circulating the paddock.
Yeah.
I mean, Toto Wolff, the Mercedes team principal, completely brushed the new regulations off. He literally called the whole situation a storm in a teacup.
Yeah, he wasn't fazed at all.
He stated on the record that the new rules won't change anything for their performance. And even Red Bull, who you would expect to be screaming from the rooftops demanding penalties if they thought Mercedes was cheating, completely dismissed the drama.
They did. They called the media frenzy a lot of noise about nothing.
And Nicholas Tombazis from the FIA is out there doing damage control, insisting there was no cheat, just a desire to make things even-handed.
The phrase even-handed is doing a lot of heavy lifting for the FIA right now. What you are seeing is a delicate political dance.
How so?
The FIA needs to look like they are taking decisive action to placate the frustrated fan base, but they also don't want to officially brand a legacy manufacturer like Mercedes as cheaters. The unanimous vote allows everyone to save face while supposedly fixing the sport.
But I have to challenge this entire timeline. Let's look at the calendar for a second. Toto Wolff is shrugging this off, and Red Bull says it's just noise. But this new 130-degree hot test doesn't actually take effect until June 1st.
Right, after race 7.
That is a massive operational window. Mercedes is essentially guaranteed the first 7 races of the season with completely uncontested hypercar-level dominance before this judgment day arrives.
Which is an eternity in F1.
It is. If Mercedes secures maximum points for 7 straight races while the midfield is busy blowing up their own energy systems, isn't this championship functionally decided before we even hit the summer break?
It is a bleak perspective, but analytically, it is highly probable. The structural damage to the 2026 championship narrative might already be done.
Yeah, the math just doesn't work.
Exactly. If you build a 50-point lead in the constructors' standings by June, the mathematical mountain for Ferrari or Red Bull to climb becomes nearly impossible, even if the new regulations manage to reel Mercedes in by a few tenths of a second per lap.
And reeling them in assumes the new rules actually work, which ignores the reality of how these cars are built.
Exactly. You cannot simply undesign an entire Formula One power unit in 3 months. These engines take years of research, development, and bench testing to construct.
So the DNA of the engine is already set.
The architecture is baked in. A mid-season technical directive might force a team to run slightly more conservative engine mappings or, trim the absolute peak of their straight-line speed, but it rarely closes a foundational multi-second performance gap.
So it's not a magic fix.
No. If the M17 engine is fundamentally superior in its energy deployment, capping the compression ratio under heat is like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound for the rest of the grid.
Which brings up a fascinating historical parallel from your notes. The overarching theme bubbling beneath all of these panicked regulations seems to be profound fear from the governing body.
Utter terror, honestly.
Yeah, they are looking at the early telemetry, they are hearing the fan frustration, and they are terrified of a repeat of 2014.
The 2014 hybrid turbo era is the ghost haunting the FIA right now. When the regulations drastically changed back then, Mercedes nailed the engineering so perfectly with the W05 that they embarked on an unprecedented 8-year run of dominance.
8 years.
It severely hurt the sport's global viewership because the element of unpredictability was completely erased. The FIA is looking at the 2026 data and seeing the exact same pattern emerging.
And they can't afford that again.
They are terrified that if they do not intervene aggressively and immediately, they are locking themselves into another decade of one-team parades.
It makes complete sense from a business perspective. I mean, the promise of new regulations is always sold to the fans as a reshuffled deck. It's supposed to bring closer racing, new winners, and chaos.
That's why people tune in to season openers.
Exactly. When that promise is broken so spectacularly on day one, and you deliver a multi-class endurance race where the leader is in another time zone, the backlash is going to be fierce. The fans feel cheated out of a competitive season.
And that frustration is entirely justified. The viewers invest time and emotion expecting a duel, not a solo exhibition.
Nobody wants to watch a ghost ship do laps.
Right. The FIA's rapid mid-season regulatory strike shows they hear the fans' anger. But as the timeline and the engineering realities suggest, regulating parity into existence after the cars have already hit the track is incredibly difficult, if not impossible.
So to pull all these threads together from your notes today, the 2026 Formula One season has inadvertently fractured into a multi-class Le Mans race.
Yes.
You have Mercedes sitting completely alone in an elite hypercar class with a seemingly untouchable M17 power unit. Behind them, you have an LMP2-style midfield pushing their engineering too hard and suffering explosive reliability issues.
And the back marker.
Right, an LMGT3 tier of back markers getting swallowed whole by a brutal new 6-car elimination in qualifying. So the FIA is frantically trying to stop the bleeding by instituting a strict 130°C hot test.
Hoping to close that thermal loophole.
Exactly. Aiming to cap engine compression at a 16.1 ratio and close any thermal expansion tricks hidden in the metallurgy. But because paddock politics dictated that these rules don't kick in until June 1st, Mercedes has a massive 7-race runway.
A huge head start.
It is a head start that might just render the entire championship mathematically over before the summer break begins.
It is a deeply complex, highly political situation that cuts to the very core of what motorsport is supposed to be. And looking at all this data leaves us with a highly provocative question to consider.
Lay it on us.
If a team's engineering department simply does a better job mastering the physics and the regulations better than anyone else, and the FIA's ultimate solution is to instantly change the rules mid-season to punish that success, does Formula One cease to be a true engineering championship?
That is a tough question.
At what point does desperately regulating parity cross the line into artificially scripting the sport purely for entertainment?
That is the ultimate paradox of the sport, isn't it? Because if punishing absolute brilliance is the only way to keep the game remotely fair for everyone else, you have to wonder if the rules of the game were fundamentally broken to begin with.
It really makes you think.
It brings us right back to that video game lobby we started in. You can try to patch the game to stop the player with the cheat codes, but if the underlying code is that easily exploited, maybe it is time to build a new game entirely.
Well said.
Thank you for diving into the telemetry with us today. Keep questioning the mechanics behind the headlines, and we will catch you on the next deep dive into your sources.
25 laps to go. You have overtaken Charles Strong. When I get on the pit straight, I've got no power. You understand that, Vince? Yeah, coming back to you. I go to this. Please update when you can. Switch position yellow, switch position yellow. Double yellow, 33. Double yellow.
Yeah, come look at this.
What was Leclerc doing?
What?
Leclerc just backed up Lewis in the crate.
F1 has a new loophole, and it's more complex than you think. And it's all around the piston, because in 2026 the FIA said teams can only compress their fuel-air mixture to 16:1. For context, a Ferrari road car does about 10:1, and F1 used to do 18. Higher compression means more power, but push too hard and the engine tears itself apart. But here's the clever bit. The FIA measures the compression ratio when the engine is cold, 20 degrees and standing still. But at 12,000 RPM, metal expands. Pistons grow and rods stretch. So it's said that Mercedes and Red Bull designed pistons that expand in exactly the right way. Traditional pistons are machined from solid metal, simple shapes. But these pistons are 3D printed, laser fused layer by layer. That lets engineers create internal structures that are literally impossible to machine, with hidden channels and hollow sections. Structures that are designed to grow precisely when heat hits them. So compression is 16:1 when the FIA checks it cold, but closer to 18:1 when they're racing at Monza. The other teams are furious, not because it's cheating, but because they didn't think of it first.
Yeah, did you see that? True. FIA is really killing the sport. I mean, from the years we have seen, every time there's a rule change, one team will be dominant. FIA seems they don't close the loopholes teams find. We saw when Red Bull for 4 years was dominant, and then Mercedes from 2014 to 2020 took over dominant. It was just a race between Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton, or with Bottas. It was crazy. And then 2021 happened, where probably FIA saw that they were losing a lot of fans because it was just getting too much. What did they do? They broke their own rules. What do I mean? They broke their own rules and stole the championship from Lewis and gave it to Max Verstappen just to gain fans. And it worked. It did work. And then we saw now Red Bull took over and became dominant. Then came McLaren to stop them. Then now we have new change. It looks like we are back to 2014, where you will see Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton 40 seconds ahead of the whole field, racing just the two of them. That wasn't Formula One, that was Le Mans. Literally, it was Le Mans. That's what we have even now. It's Le Mans. You've seen gap to Ferrari, 25 seconds. Ferrari to the other rest of the field, 30 seconds. Another one, 20 seconds. What is that? What is that? A day when we have equal power units, maybe it will work. Last year it was there. Teams now started becoming together. You saw from leader during qualify to 16th under 1 second. That's what's supposed to happen. But we still need to find Formula One where those who are in the back literally also getting pole positions. Imagine Williams, pole position, Haas, pole position. That's what we need. Then we will have Formula One. How can that happen? FIA need to fix their rules. It's good there will be a rule change. Let's hope when that happens, the field get compressed and we have real Formula One. Right now, at least Ferrari is giving us some entertainment, though it looks hopeless that this year Mercedes got it, because we are in 2014, back in history. We are watching, maybe they should rename it to Formula One Le Mans. Because this is a joke, man. It's a joke. It should be F1 Le Mans. Anyway, let me hear what you got to say. Let's discuss about this. Because if we speak, look at what made, like I said, what made FIA break their own rules and let Max Verstappen get the championship that was under their own broken rules. Imagine right now, the same fans, you speak out. They see that, oh, we are losing fans. Let's fix this. They can do that. Because they know that's a business. I don't know. Let me hear what you gotta say in the comments. On social media, I will share this. Let's see what you got to say about this. Because if we keep quiet, Mercedes runs away with the title. We will be watching every race this whole year just between Russell and Kimi. So, let's go in the comments and thank you for watching. Goodbye.